Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. Really excited to be chatting about brand. With us today, we have Specioser Mutheu from Octavia Carbon. She's a communications manager for a startup that has rapidly grown. If you haven't already, remember to subscribe or follow us on LinkedIn for the latest news and updates. Specioser, thank you so much for joining us. Super chuffed that you're here. For all our listeners, you've obviously got a really interesting background. Do you want to tell us a bit more about your journey? I mean, you've got this actuarial science background, strategic communication. Yeah, just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Hello, everyone. My name is Specioser Mutheu, short form Spacey. I'm the communications manager at Octavia Carbon, where we are building technology to filter carbon dioxide from the atmosphere to help reverse climate change. So, my journey in the marketing and communication space began with Octavia, of course. As Lindsay said, I have a background in actuarial science. I'm a fan of maths. I love numbers. But as I went into the job market, I realized I love more of storytelling. And when I came across the opportunity through Octavia, I was like, wow, this is such an important sort of niche that I would want to shape the narrative. I was curious, of course, first, how is this happening in Kenya in my backyard and I'm not aware of it? So a bit of skepticism around that. But over time, when I got the job, I was really fascinated by what the people around were doing. And since then, 2 years and a half down the line, doing this work and happy to be here with you guys.
That's really awesome. Specioso, so you've kind of pretty much been with Octavia since they started. Tell our listeners a little bit more about Octavia Carbon. So you've mentioned DAC Technologies. For our listeners that have no idea about DAC Technologies, what exactly is it? Where do you guys operate? And what's your vision and mission?
Okay, so Octavia Carbon is the first direct air capture company. I'll refer it as DAC if you hear me mentioning DAC. Essentially, we are the first in Africa and the global south. And what we're doing is we are designing, building, and deploying machines that can capture carbon dioxide from the atmosphere for permanent storage. This is in efforts to help reverse the effects of climate change. As we might know, the escalating levels of CO2 in our atmosphere are exacerbating the climate issue. So as such, our mission is to help reverse the effects of climate change. We are currently headquartered in Nairobi, Kenya, where we have our manufacturing and R&D facilities, and we have a project site within the central Kenyan Rift Valley, where we are deploying a direct air capture and geological storage facility.
Really awesome and really exciting work that you're doing. I mean, you start up and pretty much, I suppose in Africa, you guys are so unique, but you're also competing with the big internationals that are, deploying the same sort of technologies. But before we get into that, tell me a little bit about your team and the complement that you work with from the communication side.
Okay, as an organization, largely we are a team of engineers. They make up more than 2/3 of the organization. But away from that, within the commercialization department, where marketing and communication sits, we have various roles. And as part of that, the one of the core functions, stroke one of the core muscles we try nurture within the commercialization team is technical writing, essentially because we engage with a lot of stakeholders, and that involves translating technical information into sort of digestible bits, depending on the audience, of course. And as part of that, we have sort of honed this within the commercialization space where everyone is sort of a storyteller of what we do and why we do it and why it's important.
It's nice to have those technical skills that you can leverage as well. I know most of the time marketing is, generally a lot of people refer to it as, fun blue sky kind of thinking, but there is always that technical component to it. But I mean, I've been so excited to chat to you because I was doing a little bit of a snooping and, you guys have roughly been around for 3 years and you've got 14K or almost 14K followers on LinkedIn, which is roughly about 4,600 followers a year. In the last 30 days, you've generated over 400 followers with just 4 posts, with an average engagement of 620 in the last 30 days, which is damn impressive as a startup. Kudos to you guys. You're obviously doing something right. So really, really cool. Seeing as you guys are startups and a lot of our listeners are startups, they're going to have a lot of questions around how do you get to those success metrics that you guys have. In your experience, what should startups be focusing on first and foremost when building a marketing plan and strategy?
Yeah, first and foremost, I believe is identifying who is your target audience before you think about what campaign you want to put out there and what message. You have to know who are you talking to and what problem are you solving to them. So understanding the target audience kind of defines the roadmap of the marketing strategy. And even as you go about now with the framing of what comes next after knowing your target audience, where do they hang out, which content do they usually digest, and what channels are they more likely to be in. Now you define what is the message you want to put out there. And once you refine sort of the message stroke narrative, key aspect is to keep it simple, clear, and also have some consistency in terms of how you put out this message, whether it's across the various channels or it's through creating the consistent sort of map out of how you want to put out this information from time to time. So I feel target audience is an important aspect because it shapes the roadmap and even how you communicate, which channels to target, what works and what doesn't work out. Of course, it's not easy to figure out how your target audience, what resonates with them. Sometimes you'll miss in the beginning, you'll have a lot of misses. Over time, the more you maintain this consistency in terms of what we put out, it also builds on the metrics that you can kind of benchmark. Okay, this worked well and this didn't work well. This had a lot of engagement, so this resonated well. What can we take away from these bits?
So having that structure in terms of closing that analytics sort of loop when you're understanding your target audience and what they engage with, would you say is, a key foundation for a lot of companies that are wanting to get the most out of their marketing? And talk us a little bit through the unique selling proposition. So you guys are, of course, very unique in Africa, but you're not necessarily unique from the international standpoint of what you guys are doing, which is great for what you're doing in Africa, but it's super competitive for you guys to create a unique selling proposition against all these international brands that are really well established. How would you define creating a USP, and what advice do you have for our listeners? What worked, what didn't work? How do you sort of go about that?
Yeah, of course. So creating a unique selling point, of course, for Octavia, it has been an easy peasy, especially with the uniqueness of operating in a new geographic where not so many entrants have explored. It was easy, but I think when it comes to marketing, it goes beyond the unique selling points. What matters more, I believe, is the credibility around the brand, because it's easy to come up with catchy lines about what you're doing, but what truly matters is, can people trust you to deliver on what you're saying? So part of that learning has been refining our narrative and maintaining the consistency and even showing people the various stages of our success. Because sometimes people overthink about people, it has to be grand milestones or something major for you to stand out within the market. But also, what people don't realize is people care about the various stages of success, and that sometimes include the failures. Show people behind your journey who are even people behind the mission who are shaping up the brand. People like to humanize experience where they don't feel out of touch with what's happening. So when you constantly share what's happening behind the scenes, it makes it easy to build that credibility around your brand. And from then, people even can trust you because they have seen how far you've come, what ways you've failed, what's next, what can they expect, and stuff like that.
That's really awesome advice, because I think a lot of startups sort of have that feeling like I need to have something really big and exciting news to get out there. And they almost sort of wait, for that process to happen. And it becomes, a game of, geez, it's been months since I've published something. And like you rightly said, how do you build that trust when it's so intermittent? When you talk about sharing the stories and the incremental stories of the brand, what does that storytelling look like? If you were to sort of frame that map, what advice do you have? What could that particularly be for startups that want to sort of go on the storytelling journey? What's good, what isn't good?
Yeah, I think what that looks like when it comes to storytelling, like you have even highlighted, it's not about the big milestones, but how you're going about the mission. And this includes sharing visuals from snippets of behind the scenes, whether it's just people actually relate to a lot of content where they get to see like what's really happening. So away from part of the content that you're sharing, it also involves participating in thought leadership within your space. This can be offering to collaborate with the other ecosystem players on webinars, even showing up where you feel like people who matter to your brand exist, because that gives you even an extra layer to tell your story in person. So this can take the form of leveraging the channels you have identified. For us, it's been LinkedIn from the word go, where we maintained consistency, at least posting whether it's once or twice a week. It might be a strain, especially where you have a small team and also you don't want to outweigh them with what doesn't feel as a priority at that time. But even consistent, so you can start with maybe once in every 2 weeks, and over time you improve that consistency. And then, like I said, the other stuff is thought leadership within your space, encouraging even your people within the team to share the story. How is it working for this brand? Because you kind of get third party sort of accreditation, and this kind of pulls into their network. Because when people say, see, all Specioser posted this, I know Space. So it kind of helps you grow even that brand beyond what you go, maybe paid media and stuff like that. So leveraging in what's within your reach. Part of that is maintaining consistency in the social media, showing up to events, industry events, and even sometimes volunteering.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And I mean, you guys, you look like you go to a lot of events all over the world. How does a startup sort of go about getting onto these events without breaking the budget? And you've also sort of discussed a little bit about these networks that you can use. What does that look like from a tangible perspective? So the one side is, how do you foster these networks that can drive exposure? But also, how do you get involved in these really awesome events that are going to give you more exposure without breaking the bank?
Yeah. So one of the ways we have been able to be everywhere is leveraging partnerships within the ecosystem, and especially accelerator programs, which offer tailored support to startups. For us operating in the climate space, we often look out for programs that are interested in supporting startups. And this sometimes comes in-kind support, whereby some programs ask you what are your priority areas, where can they support. Some, of course, are built to be one shoe fits all, especially for early stages, because problems are usually cut across most of the companies. But as you go, you find programs become more tailored in the sense that you are able to filter out, depending on where you are and the stage of the company, you are able to say this would work best. And even as part of the criteria where some of the accelerators use is they clearly define the type of startups they are looking for. So as part of this, you find that with the in-kind support comes brand visibility, where you are invited and sponsored to attend events. You are considered a thought leader within the space, so they value your voice. And even away from that, they even introduce you to networks that can help sort of map out some of these things, such as marketing strategy and all that.
Awesome.
Part of these accelerators include the likes of Google Accelerator programs. So you can always be in the lookout by maybe looking through social media, especially LinkedIn, where we have some thought leaders who post about these opportunities. But even away from that, we live in an age of AI where everything is simplified. So you can use your friend, ChatGPT, or any other AI solution that you prefer to just help you scope out or even give you an idea of some of these programs within the ecosystem. So away from that, on the second question, where you ask about how you go about establishing these relations, especially with various key players, I think it's asking yourself who would benefit from me succeeding, because that helps you create that shared benefit in where mutual benefits, whereby you can amplify each other's brand visibility, and you can clearly stipulate the ask by you helping me achieve this, you stand to gain this. And you find in most cases, once you answer the question who benefits when I succeed, they are more likely to and willing to want to collaborate with you or to help you put out your story, to help you identify the right partners, the right customers, and some of the things that you need to figure out in the early days. And sometimes this might be your investors, it might be some of the customers you've interacted with. Yeah. So it kind of, the pipeline kind of builds out over time, but and even sometimes even your friends. Yeah.
That's really cool. And do you have any advice? I mean, how to assess if someone's a good partner? Do you go and look to see how many followers they have? Or, how do you make sure that that partnership and the time you're putting into it really, has a positive impact on what you're trying to achieve?
So I think mostly once you have identified the shared benefit in terms of what stands to come out, what's the goal of establishing this relationship, then you will easily narrow down on whether this would be the ideal. And even away from that, especially when it comes to marketing and communications, most of the times I feel like startups focus on going for the big names. And in that case, they miss out, because sometimes it's not about the big names. Sometimes you can be leveraging a new coalition that was formed yesterday, but it has maybe 5 companies, but these 5 companies also have networks. So don't overlook the small players within the ecosystem, because sometimes we tend to go for the big names. Maybe you are trying to chase a feature in Bloomberg, but for it to come, you need to start with the baby steps and where you have reach within. So what I would advise, especially when establishing this kind of relations, once you have identified what's the outcome you want out of it, also don't overlook the small players within the ecosystem that can help tell your story, and from that even widen your network.
That's really useful info. And I'm guessing that the smaller players probably it's a lot easier to get their buy-in because, they're
Yeah.
sort of in the same boat and it's nice to go on that long-term journey with them. Also, do you have any advice regarding the accelerator programs, what to look out for or maybe avoid when engaging with accelerator programs that might be helpful to some of the listeners?
Yeah. So when mapping out the right sort of accelerator programs to go for, of course, good thing most of them usually have a criteria in terms of how they select startups and what they are really looking for. You'll find, and also what they want in exchange for free support or for this paid support. Some, of course, do come with asks where they expect maybe some equity share, or the funding they give you is dilutive, or sometimes dilutive, which in this case now they want equity, which or grants that converts. So when looking for accelerator programs, identify the stage of growth where you are in, what are some of the areas that you need support in, because mostly they're there to offer support. And if maybe they are offering support in terms of human resource, and for you maybe that's not a core issue within your organization, then no need to waste efforts on that. Also sometimes when scouting for these accelerator programs, some do offer the opportunity to engage in the sense of try to seek more additional information in terms of how is the program structured before you even go into the program. Good thing, there are usually stages to it. They just don't accept you. You put in an application, and after putting in an application, maybe you are invited to virtual pitch where they get to decide, and then they share an offer of what they can offer you, and then from there on maybe you can bargain or push back on what's possible and what's not possible. In some cases, like maybe they'd want you as a founder to show up for all virtuals and it's not possible. In that case, you can negotiate, tell them in this case maybe someone else from the team will take up this, but I'll be able to show up for this. So it's more of identifying the stage of growth where you're in and where do you need the most support. And then from there, you can match that with the criteria of the various accelerator programs.
That's really awesome. And how long are most of these accelerator programs? I mean, what are you tied into on average? What does that look like? And when do you hear back?
So for some, they do, in terms of when you hear back, most of them usually outline the sort of phases till they select the final winners. Some of them are usually in cohorts where you have 20 companies or 10 companies. Some are even small to 4 companies. So the phases of the application process are usually clearly outlined as per the program or the accelerator. Then away from that, most of these usually range from I'd say an average of 3 months, whereby from this they have maybe 2 sessions a week or 1 session a week. Or for the longer ones where it's like 6 months, you'll find they have 2 sessions a month and stuff like that.
Awesome. And tell me also a bit about, so you said that you obviously use LinkedIn a lot. Have you had any sort of experiences there that you'd like to chat about, what has worked and what hasn't worked? I mean, you've spoken a lot about the content that you use. What content really does get the most impact? Is it those people posts or the technical stuff? What sort of, in your view, will generate the most eyes and maybe even the engagement side of it?
Yeah, of course. So in terms of LinkedIn, I can share a bit of bits and bits I've picked along the way. So one, of course, key is people engage most with content that humanizes people. They like seeing the people behind the mission. An important aspect is like the employee spotlight, where we put out people who find it easy to engage with organizational content, especially if you look at most of the companies, you'll realize they rarely get engagement in terms of just any post they put out. But if there's a person or a story showing just behind the scenes or people working on the mission, people tend to engage with that because they relate to that. That's not to say that you keep on posting about people over and over and over. Of course, as a company, you want to also share your traction in terms of the big deals you're signing, the partnerships. There won't be engagement, but it will still build credibility, say affiliating yourself and putting out these announcements in terms of where you are, in terms of your roadmap and all that. So it's not to say even when a post doesn't engage, it hasn't achieved what it was supposed to achieve, because you'll be surprised you go into a meeting and they say, oh, congratulations, I saw that. But when you look at the post, you see only 20 likes. So it's just that people select what to engage with and what not to engage with. But so a nice way to go about it is just to create a blend of the two. Like in some cases, I avoid putting out partnership announcements like 2 weeks in a row or 3 weeks back to back, 3 posts about partnerships. So just finding a blend between the two kind of boosts that engagement and also helps you grow.
And have you used much paid advertising, and how have you found that journey?
No. So interestingly, even with the Grow network of about 14K followers, we're yet to leverage paid media. It's basically been organically, and one of the greatest assets we have leveraged is our people. We say everyone is a brand ambassador of Octavia, not by imposing, but because we believe in the mission so strong, in the sense that we all become brand ambassadors in that sense. So a way in which we have leveraged our people even beyond them, encouraging them to be thought leaders in the space, is also encouraging them to amplify our message. Whether when we put out announcements, we're just encouraging them to kind of help amplify that. And of course, that is also organic in the sense is they're not required to, just encouraged to put out the message, because who knows, within your network, maybe cousin of just Jeff Bezos or something like that. So yeah, so one of the greatest assets has been leveraging our people, and even away from that, our partners. Sometimes once you start growing your partner networks, you can be sharing these tidbits of info that are relevant to them, of course, and encouraging them to help you amplify. And away from that, for the big news now, which attract media, you can leverage, you can share this news with them in advance and see whether they pick it up. Of course, not all news makes news, but that doesn't mean you don't put it out. You have to be strategic in what you engage the media about. because most of the time for them, they want something, a wow moment, something unique, something controversial.
On that note of PR, because a lot of PR, they want to be the only one with that news. So how do you also build those relationships with the journalists? How do you go about that? Because normally also PR, if you pay for it, it costs an arm and a leg.
So mostly how we go about our PR, of course, building that network has been mainly through what we call Friends of Octavia. This involves investors, especially if you get to a point where you have VC funding. You find most of these VCs have access to these big media houses because they are more established. And even away from that, a friend of a friend might have relations with this. But even away from that, that doesn't guarantee that your news will be picked. So what you do is, of course, once you establish that media list, and sometimes even for some media houses, they have a channel where you can share this news with. So you work backwards in terms of when do you want this release to go out? Is it within 2 months time, or is it a month? Mostly 2 months is exaggerated, but is it within a month? Now from there, you have to create an allowance for engaging the media, whereby maybe you prioritize the top five, because they also want exclusivity, where you just share with them and tell them it will be embargoed till this time. Do you want to pick it out? And then they'll tell you what works in case it resonates with them. And then from there, now you can give them time to first put out the news. And in case they don't, you go now for the other people within the list. So mostly leverage your networks, especially if you are in the VC, you have VC investors or other partners who already have news that has been picked by these media houses. It makes it easier for the warm intros. And then from there, you can also scope out some of these connections, whether it's from their website where they have a general sort of collection, news collection point, or stuff like that.
That's awesome. I think what I'm also sort of taking away there is that it's quite important to vet your VCs. Obviously, you do, but understanding what they can bring from a marketing perspective and what networks they have for you to leverage early on before you sort of get into a relationship with them. Specioso, have you found, so you talk a lot about doing organic marketing and the success that you've had with it and building that trust and credibility across the market. How have you found that journey to be? How long did it take to start generating return on investment through organic marketing? Do you have any sort of insights on what that journey looks like and how long potentially startups need to be waiting for before they get their first email or phone call?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I'd say for that, it really depends on the sector you operate in. For us, we operate in an interesting niche where deals could take up to 6 months. So sometimes it's hard to really correlate at what point this resonated with them. But even for away from that, away from the traction or what deals are coming in, like you've said, there are other ways to really gauge whether you are building the impact or the credibility within the space. Part of this is how within time you are following growth over time, and sometimes it becomes easy for people to pick up news bits from you without even imposing it in them. So I wouldn't say it's the easiest. Maybe for some who operate in a different ecosystem, it's easy to track traction in terms of the deals coming in from the kind of storytelling and the credibility you're building. But even away from that, one way we measure whether our marketing is working and stuff like that is also some of the other hidden conversion rates, whether it's we get nowadays I just get surprised, oh, we've been featured somewhere, and then I'm like, oh wow, I never saw that coming over time. Yeah, and even compliments from people within the ecosystem whereby they see the work you're doing, and over time this will now start trickling as to deals coming in. And even now, from once you establish this credibility, the story shifts, because it's not about proving trust. It's already people come knowing you are a trusted, credible brand. So this is what I want us to work on. So you just shift the narrative from having to prove who you are and what you're doing within the ecosystem, but more of, okay, now with this, how can we build on this, and how can we establish a partnership that is mutually benefiting from
Yeah, I like that component that you speak about. I mean, we mentioned it right in the beginning as well about tracking the successes and the analytics, but especially when you're doing organic marketing, that lead time is so long that if you're not tracking it from early on, then it's months and months later before cop on what's working and what's not working. Have you found that there are other platforms and stats that you like to use outside of maybe LinkedIn stats that help you make better marketing decisions and using it for business intelligence and marketing intelligence?
Yeah, interesting. I think for us, our focus has been so closed on LinkedIn that we're yet to explore more. But even from the knowledge that I've built from the industry, one thing I've learned is don't overlook platforms, and different platforms serve a different purpose. So, like you see with LinkedIn, most people, given that it's a professional space, are usually more likely to go there looking maybe for jobs and stuff like that. So it established shows credibility even within the talent pool you're looking to scope out. But even away from that, in the case whereby you do look into other channels, the likes of TikToks, of course, depending on the niche that you're operating with, whether it's YouTube, whether it's X, and whether it's on Reddit. So I think it's more deciding on where you want to be strategic with, especially like I highlighted, when capacity is limited, it will be, it's of course it's easy to replicate content across various channels that can also help you track some of these metrics. But even away from that, I think identifying where somewhere where you'll be consistent in, it's easy now to build on to that, see what works over time. Over time, of course, we'll like to grow. We'd like to have a YouTube channel where we share short stories and all that. But you have to prioritize what would be most ideal, and away from that, now kind of develop what would work and maintain consistency. Because one thing is, if you leave a vacuum, then people are gonna still start telling your story, and they'll run with different narratives. The goal is not to leave vacuums, and don't let other people tell your story. Be the one, be the voice of your story, and let other people come amplify it, but not be the one who start asking, oh, Octavia has been silent. We think this and this and this and this is happening. So when you pick a channel and maintain the consistency, and then over time as you grow, now you can sort of diversify the channels where you tell your story.
I like that because you also, I suppose, you got to keep that momentum building. And I always think
Yeah.
with marketing now and AI, feeds are flooded. So, if you do some really great post 2 weeks ago, everyone's already forgotten about it because all your competitors are shooting, posts and
Yeah.
posts and posts out. So rather get the info out. But also, I like what you said there, that, you never know where your decision makers are sitting. Yes, you target them, and yes, they're on LinkedIn, but that
Yeah.
CEO could be a TikTok fan. And
Yeah.
so having that diversity of strategy while still focusing on your core is important. But of course, like you said, it depends on capacity and what you can and can't do. So everyone, we're running short on time, but stay tuned for the next episode of Specioser. In the next chapter, we're getting hands-on. Specioser will dive into the creative side of startup marketing and what actually works from a practical standpoint, how to stretch a tight budget, and where to invest first when you're building your brand from scratch. We love to hear feedback from our listeners, so drop us a comment or send us a DM. And remember to subscribe. Until next week, everyone.